do I do that? Continue. Okay, sorry, it won't. Oops, back. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I lost my, oh, there it is. Continue. Okay. I want to make it so I can see your faces. There we go. But you can chat me. I think I can see that too. But just holler or just interrupt me. I'm easy. Okay. So, can you guys see that? No problem. All right. One of the things in time management that we talk about a lot is making more time. And we really can't make more time. But so it really comes down to managing what you're doing in your time. And this gets right into what Raven was saying about, like, okay, I do things that I love, but I'm not doing other things that maybe I need to be doing. So my goal in time management when I work with people is to really help them look at the tasks they're doing, manage the tasks they're doing, and then delegate them in the appropriate way. So generally speaking, if you've ever worked with somebody before or read articles or anything about time management, it's usually an attempt to do the same thing, but faster, rather than deciding if you need to be doing that thing at all. And that's a lot of it, is like we just decide that this capsule of what we do on a daily basis is we must do it, we must continue doing it. So how do we do it faster? How do we do it without interruption and get through it? The problem with that is as soon as you start to do something faster, you increase the chances that you have mistakes, you increase the chances that you miss something. So it's not about doing everything that we do faster, it's about deciding what do we really need to be doing. And this is going to be very, very detailed in terms of a way that you can analyze the task that you're doing. And for some people, it feels a little bit overwhelming when I first go through it. But I think as we get into it, you'll get the heart of what I'm trying to get at, which is you really have to analyze the things you are currently doing and find a way to create space in your current schedule. The reason why I focus on creating space is because once you have space created, like, I'm sorry, was it Cami? Yeah, Cami was saying, I just don't have enough time to do the things I do. Once you create space, then you have the latitude for things to go wrong, for emergencies to come up. And when an emergency comes up or something takes longer than you expect, you're not panicked because now your schedule is going to run up against your next thing that you needed to get done right then. So by creating space, we have this downtime that allows projects to expand or contract as they need to. I know when I was speaking at WordCamp, a few people, I had asked about this because I'm not a website developer, but I had asked that my assumption is that when you're building websites, depending on your client, that you think that the scope of the project is this big, and then you found out your client makes it this bigger and this big. So it seems to me that in your jobs, you'd need a lot of space for the unknowns that your client presents. Is that accurate? Yeah, I see some nods there. Okay. So that's the goal of what I'm going to talk about today. Sorry, I now have lost my ability to move my slide forward. Why does that? Okay. It's always worse when people that know how to use technology are watching you. I'm just going to own that. There we go. Just clicking the button, Annie. Okay. Instead, we need to evaluate what you're doing and then categorize it as needed. So let's talk about how we categorize that. First of all, if you want to get serious about time management, I recommend that people record everything that they do for a week. Now, the immediate response to that is, I don't have time to do what I'm doing. That's why I'm talking to you. So now why would I want to add the time of recording everything that I do each week? And this doesn't have to be super fancy, but if you can record what you do each week accurately with how much time you spend on it, it really helps you see where you actually spend time. And the reason we need to do that is because we can, if we're asked in our heads, what did you do today? A lot of us will just say, I worked. But part of that, especially when you own your own business, you work by yourself, is you're doing everything from fixing this little problem to client interfacing to answering emails to all of these different varied things. And the amount of time you spend answering emails versus the amount of time that you spend in code versus the amount of time that you spend just invoicing people or whatever is very important, because those are really different tasks, but we tend to say that's work. So if you can record things for a week and really see how much time you spend on each of those, it's helpful. So record everything and record the time you spend on that activity. And I find the easiest way to do this is I open an email to myself and I just keep it open as a draft for the week. And after maybe like every 2 hours, I just go in and try to recreate what I just did pretty quickly, so you don't forget what you did. And I do recognize that this can feel tedious, but you'll be surprised at where you spend your time. And when we talk about categorizing tasks later, you'll see why it makes such a difference to do this. And when I say record the time you spend on all activities, I also mean laying around doing nothing. Like when you're just sitting there Netflixing and eating popcorn, that is good to record your time. The reason why is because we tend to overestimate the time we spend on things we think are important, and we underestimate the time we spend on things that we think are a waste of time. So if somebody asks us what you did today, we're more likely to say, man, I spent 4 hours with clients and I only watch TV for an hour a night. But when you record it, you actually might find that you only spend about 3 hours on client work, and you actually are watching 3 hours of TV, right? So it's our nature to overestimate things that we perceive to be more important than other things, and underestimate things that we know I use quotes, shouldn't be doing, because I think there are times when we absolutely should be laying around eating popcorn. So I just say that in our own heads, with our own perception of getting stuff done, especially if our to-do list is long, we tend to underestimate the things that are wasting our time.
So Annie, you're talking about recording everything from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, not just like your time you designate as work hours.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So, it takes you an hour to get ready in the morning. You don't need to put brushing your teeth or, whatever. You don't need to do that. But like you from the time you get out of bed to the time you start work, what's that amount of time? And then when you're working, more importantly, is during the day when you're working, is what is client time? What is actual, like I would call customer service? When are you interfacing actively with clients? When are you actually designing something? When are you answering emails? And how much time do you spend doing that? Now, if you're somebody, here's an example. If you're somebody that answers emails as soon as your notification pops up, I'm going to say, don't do that anymore. Block that. Check your emails like once every 2 hours, not every time the notification pops up, because each time you switch tasks, you will spend more time overall. So let's say you do 10 tasks in a day, but you're jumping around this task, this task, this task, this task. It might take you 4 hours to do them, where if you had blocked those tasks and just done one at a time, it could take you half that amount of time. The amount of time we waste just jumping from one thing to another is huge. And the biggest interruption of that time tends to be our email, tends to be our notifications. Here's somebody calling me. Here's somebody emailing me. Here's somebody pinging me on social media. Where if those notifications are shut off, so you can focus on something, like let's use Raven's point as an example. Let's say Raven, what's something you loathe doing in your business? What do you just procrastinate on?
Writing invoices, which you would think I'd want to do, because if I don't do it, people don't send me money.
I've heard that so many times. I totally get it. Let's say you have to do invoices, right? I would say if you're going to block out 1 hour to do invoices, turn off your notifications and set a timer and say invoices only for 1 hour, right? Because if you have notifications and you're doing something you don't like to do, and now you get this email from somebody that's interested in working with you, isn't that way
Shiny thing.
fascinating? Right. And you can completely justify that. You can be like, well, I need to stop doing this to get new work, right? But you can actually get that new work at the end of your hour too. And then your invoices are done and behind you. So that's just one example of time blocking, which we'll talk about later. But the concept is if you track what you do during your day, you're going to know how much time you spend all over. And if you say, well, how would I track my email time? I check it every time I get a notification. There's your answer. There's your answer. You don't know how much time you spend on it because you're always checking it, right? Any questions about recording stuff? Does it sound painful? It's totally fine if it sounds painful.
A little bit.
I already do that because I'm recording what I'm spending my time on at work.
Right. Now, so do you feel like you have a pretty good feel for where you spend your time?
Well, my actual billable time, yes. Because when I'm doing billable time, I am keeping track of how long it took me to do each item on a site. And then that's what I refer back to when I'm bidding, how long it's going to take me to build the next site.
Perfect. And then I would say focus on the
I have my phone off. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I'm saying I have my phone off. I have my distractions in another room while I'm doing that stuff. So I tell my clients, like, when you call, you're going to leave a message because when I'm focused on your stuff, I'm focused on your stuff. I'm not picking up calls from other clients.
Right. So then that is probably a good example of you probably don't need to do this first step, but there's something that will come up later that addresses how do I decide what to prioritize. So you might
going to be
find
a great step for me in terms of my non-billable time, though. How am I spending my non-billable work time is valuable information for me.
Yeah. And I always feel like everybody should adjust suggestions to their own thing. There's no one size fits all, right? So the suggestion is figure out where you spend your time in the best way for you, and just recognize that the more detailed you are about where you're spending your time, like you get up to take a little break and I have a garden. So I get up to take a little break and walk out to my garden. And then all of a sudden it's 25 minutes later because I'm sitting there eating tomatoes off the vine, right? That's now I've wasted that time. I don't know if it's wasted because it's like the best part of summer, but that it's good to recognize you thought you took a quick break, but really it went faster. It took up more time than you expected, right?
Lost the audio.
Is it back?
Yes, it's back.
Okay. Really what I was saying is it just took up more time than you expected. You think I took a quick break, but it actually ended up being half an hour. So that's why it's beneficial to track that. So after you've recorded what you do, the idea is to segment them into different categories. And this is important because we tend to have two major categories: work, not work. Or we have categories of work and, like you're saying, Raven, billable things and then everything else. But really there are more categories in this that are really important. And this is how I break down the categories for a business. And I'm going to talk about each of these. These are the 5 categories that I use, and I'll show you in the following slides how I would mark those. So now you've got your list, right? You've got your list of what you've done for a week. And now you would go through and you would say, what's a simple task? Simple tasks are things that are 5 or fewer steps. They really don't have a variable and they're really easy to replicate. So for example, maybe making an invoice is a simple step. It might not be, it depends on your business, right? But maybe an invoice is simple. Maybe it's going to be a complex step, which comes up later, but maybe something like this is more related to brick and mortar businesses, but cleaning the bathroom, that's usually pretty, you can replicate that. It's simple. There are no variables. Do this, do this, do this, do this. So when you're looking at what you've spent your time doing, what is a simple task 5 or fewer steps, no variables, easy to replicate. And the why for this will come up later, but that I would mark those with an S. Then what are moderate tasks? I'd mark these with an M. Something that is 6 or more steps. It has some variables, but they're minimal. It would be easy to replicate if you gave somebody options to replicate it. A lot of times an invoice might fall into this category where there are more steps. The variables are minimal, but if I wrote it down, I could say, you know, if you take a left here, take a right here, that's what you would do for a moderate task. So 6 or more steps, minimal variables, easy to replicate with options. And mark all of those with an M. By the way, you don't have to mark things that are non-work. That's going to be a category that's non-work. So you don't have to, if you're making popcorn for yourself, you don't have to decide if that's a simple, moderate, or complex task. Okay. A complex task is something that's multifactorial. Critical thinking is required. And if somebody else was doing it, you'd have to train them to do it well. I'm not going to guess at what that might be in your world, but I'm going to well, I guess I will guess, and you guys can correct me. I would say that interfacing with a client in terms of what they want and their design and their ultimate goals would be the next one, which would be strategic. But I would think actually doing coding could be considered complex. Like somebody could do it, but it would require a lot of critical thinking. It would require training and everything like that. So I would assume that that is something like that would follow into this category. But the overall strategy of the site would be the next category, which is strategic. So you want to mark these with a C, complex tasks. The next category is strategic. And this is basically something that no one else can do. I always say that ownership is required. This is like, I don't want people talking to my clients for me. I want to meet with my clients. I want to talk about what they need. It is separate from the operations of my business, right? So those are, that's a pretty important distinction. The operations are what makes your business go, but the bringing the clients in is, it seems like it's operational, but it's actually not operational. It's strategic, right? You need to bring people in so that you have operations to do, right? That's just one example. Client acquisition is just one example, but there are things that are in your business that no matter what, you would never hand off to somebody else. Can somebody else give me an example of something in their business that they'd never have anybody? And I know you generally work alone, but let's say you had to hire somebody. What's something else you would never let anybody else do? Does anybody have something like that?
An initial design idea for a client.
Great. Because, and tell me if I'm right, Cammie. Let's say you did have somebody working for you. You could do an initial design and then have them execute that initial design, but you'd want to create that.
Yeah, exactly. I want to steer the ship.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So that would make the initial design a strategic task, but then the actual creation of the initial design a complex task. Right? It could be done by somebody else. So you want to consider what's strategic. And also, these tend to be things that are holistic in nature, like thinking about your 5-year strategy for your business, thinking about where you want to be in 10 years, thinking about where you want to be in 6 months. Those tend to be something that you need to do. Pretty much no one else can decide for you the trajectory that your business is going. So that I consider those things holistic in nature. So the amount of time you spend on that is what you'd mark as strategic. Another example would be something like maybe you use a software and you think, you know, maybe it's time for me to look at if there's new software out there that might be better for me. I would consider that a strategic task because you're the only one that knows what you want that's better, right? You could have somebody do the preliminary research and narrow it down to 3 options. But generally, I would say that would fall under strategic. Okay. And then the final thing is everything that's non-business. And while you're looking at things that are non-business, I would be asking yourself, is it distracting? Is it procrastinating? Or is it rejuvenating? It is so important to have rejuvenating activities, right? Like I find it very beneficial during the day to go out and take a walk in the middle of my day. I like that hour break. That is rejuvenating for me. Have I used a walk to procrastinate? Yes, but I need to get rejuvenated to go back to my task at hand, right? So sometimes a task can be one or the other, but you do want to decide, am I doing this non-business activity? Is it not to my benefit? Is it not to my benefit? Is it distracting, procrastinating, or does it fall under that category of I absolutely have to do this to keep my sanity? And that those are necessary. By the way, if you have nothing on your list that's rejuvenating, I could do a whole nother presentation on that, but I would say get some stuff on your list that's rejuvenating. So those are the main categories of how you want to look at the tasks you're doing. Does anybody have any questions about this section or comments or thoughts? All right. If I don't see I think I'm seeing everybody, but if I don't see you, just interrupt me. Okay, so now you have these tasks. What do we do with them? You have 2 choices. You have only 2 choices if you want to create space. You need to eliminate them or you need to schedule them. So here are the 2 things. Elimination is great for people who are doing too much. Scheduling is great for people who'd prefer to be doing one thing instead of another thing. Okay, so Raven, you'd want to be focusing on the scheduling. There's always a mix, right? But generally eliminating people that feel that they're too busy need to eliminate. And by the way, I should have said this at the beginning, but I just want to say, I did not come from this from a place of always being, I came from this as somebody that's a complete workaholic that needed to eliminate everything, but I'm also a control enthusiast and I wanted to do everything myself. And so those things I can't also have a life and do everything myself. So I had to learn what to eliminate. So I came from this from a place of being very, very, very busy. But those are your 2 choices. Those are your only 2 choices if you want to create space. You have to eliminate something or you have to schedule it in a block, which we're going to talk about later, in order for you to manage your time a little bit better. So how do we do that? To eliminate something, you have 2 choices. You can delegate it to someone else or you can quit it. And we often don't spend time analyzing if we're doing something because we've always done it and we could just stop doing it. I think that's a big thing. If you've had a business, how many of you have had a business for years and years and years? Anybody here? Okay, so you may have something that you can think of in your head that you've always done. I've always done this. And you haven't really sat down and analyzed why. And maybe it serves a purpose, but maybe it doesn't. So when you're trying to eliminate things, you delegate it to somebody else, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, or just quit doing it. Does anybody off the top of their head have something that they know that they do that they don't need to do in their business? They just do it because they always have, that they could just stop doing? I might be putting you on the spot here, but all right. So those are your 2 choices. Delegation tends to be hard for people, especially hard for people that live alone or work alone. Maybe for people that, I don't know, but for people that work alone, it's hard to often delegate, to let go of stuff, especially if you've done stuff by yourself for a long time. Who here works completely alone, no team, no support? Okay. Anybody here have a small team? Okay, so let me see. I got it. I forget people's names, but if you raised your hand, tell me what your small team does for you. I think. No, I wish you're usually people.
I can talk now. My team is, I have a partner who is a non-technical person. He's more in the content side, and then I used to hire some resources depending on the project, like extra coders or designers.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
I work with a partner too.
Okay, okay, great. So let me ask you a question about partnerships. In partnerships, both of you probably are more, you know, you're both contributing kind of equally in your own areas of expertise into the business. Do either of you have people that aren't really a higher level in your business that just do something on the side for you? Okay, so delegation is often in this category of, you might have something here. I'm going to use invoices for an example because Raven brought them up. Invoices are something that they might be moderate or complex tasks, right? But you probably could find somebody that does bookkeeping at a very low level, and I don't know what you need, like maybe 1 hour a week, maybe less, maybe more. It depends. And this might not be a good example, Raven, but for you personally, but I'm just using it because you brought up invoicing. A lot of times we're reluctant to hire somebody, but you can hire somebody often to do just very low level things, the simple or the moderate tasks, so that you can focus on the complex and the strategic tasks, because generally the complex tasks, complex is where you make your money. You generally don't make your money on moderate tasks. You almost never make your money on simple tasks. So generally your billable hours tend to fall into complex tasks. So you really want to increase the amount of time you're spending on complex tasks, right? If that's your billable. So can you delegate even just part-time, even 1 hour a week, even minimally, some of your simple tasks? Whether it's because maybe you don't mind the simple tasks, maybe you like doing them just fine, but they take up 3 hours of your week. If you could convert that 3 hours to complex tasks or billable tasks, that's just a raise in pay, basically, right? And I think that we are reluctant to do that. The other thing that I have found is that, I found this personally, is that often someone else who does the thing for a living, like bookkeeping is something that I can do, and I did it for years, but then I finally outsourced it. And it turned out that somebody that does it for a living can do it a lot faster than I can. So I was actually paying for way less time. I didn't mind doing it. I kind of like doing it, but I'm not a bookkeeper by nature, so it took me a lot longer. And when I outsourced it, it just was like, why didn't I do this a decade ago? I don't know why. So when we look at delegation, just recognize that it can be delegation on a really low level. I will also say there's sort of a hidden side to delegation here too that's interesting, is when people do all of you work from home? Right now is probably a bad example of saying that, but generally speaking, does everybody work from home? Okay. One of the biggest, quickest things to delegate if you work at home is having somebody clean your house. I know that sounds crazy, but you can also get time other places, right? It doesn't have to be in work. You can have somebody clean your house or do your yard. There are other places that you can delegate some of your tasks to gain some time back to create space. Not necessarily to get the time back just to fill it with something else, although you could, but just to get the time back to create some space in your life. So when you're thinking about delegating, think outside the box of just work-related things. Any questions about delegating or quitting things? Okay, the next part is scheduling something. So when you schedule something, you need to determine its urgency or importance, and then you need to block like tasks. These are the two things to schedule. And when you schedule things this way, you'll find that you have less scheduling problems later, and I'll explain that in a minute. So probably everybody has seen the Eisenhower matrix, but this is the Eisenhower matrix. If you haven't seen it, here it is. Tasks fall into these 4 categories. There are tasks that are not urgent and not important, but you need to do that, right? They're not urgent. You don't have to, there's no deadline. They're not hugely important, but they need to get done, okay? There are tasks moving across that are urgent, but not important. So here's an example of a task that's urgent, but not important. You put a post on social media for your business, right? Not personal. You put a post on social media for your business and there's a typo in it. Is it urgent that you change it? Yeah, it is. Like, you need to change it because that doesn't look good. But is it super important? Have people had typos in posts forever? And like, it does it into everything? It doesn't. So it's not important, but it's urgent, right? Those tasks, if you have something that is time sensitive like that, but it's not really important, they should never sit on a calendar. They should never sit on a to-do list, right? Just do them and move on. Just fix the typo or fix whatever it is. Those things should never be scheduled for later. They should just be done and moved out of the way, right? And then lower left-hand corner, you have things that are not urgent, but they're important. So an example probably could be something like an invoice. Do you have to get it out today? You probably don't, but it's important that you actually get it out. It is, because you need the money to come in, right? So it's not necessarily urgent, but it is important. That just needs a space on the schedule, right? It just needs to be like, Thursdays at 9 a.m., I invoice. Just wherever you want to put it. If it's not urgent, but it's important, it just needs a place. It needs a time that it's going to be committed to. And that time frame needs to be so it doesn't become urgent. Does that make sense? Like, let's say you want to get invoices out within the next 2 weeks. Schedule it within that 2 weeks so it doesn't move up to the next category, which is urgent and important, okay? So urgent and important are things that tend to be emergencies. You have to solve them right now. You have a client that's, is angry and you need to deal with them right away and you can't put them off for 2 hours while you're finishing something. Urgent and important things need to be taken care of right away. So the two right-hand columns are things that just need to be put on the, done and moved out of the way, right? You don't want urgent things hanging over your head. Probably everyone can relate to this. You have something urgent that you need to do, but you procrastinate and it just stresses you out. And it's just this little weight. Oh, I got to get that done. I got to get that done. So urgent things, just schedule them, get them done. If you look at your current calendar through this matrix, the goal is to not have urgent and important things more than like one, right? The goal is to not have this list of, you don't want 5 things that are urgent and important and you just are overwhelmed at when you're going to take care of them all, right? So the goal is to be scheduling things. Hey, it's not urgent, but it is important. And so I'm going to schedule a time each week to do it. It's not urgent and not important. Here's an example of that. Maybe your strategic plan for the year. Maybe once a year you sit down and you look back at how your projects went this year, what you want to change, what you want to do differently, how that's going to work out. It's not urgent. It's not important in the sense that it changes your client interface much, but you want to do it. So maybe you just make sure that it shows up on the schedule. I have a meeting with myself quarterly. I don't know if any of you do that, but I have a strategic meeting with myself quarterly. But even though it's on the schedule, it's something I can move. It has some ability to move around should I have something that comes up that's urgent and important, because I've created space around that. So I find this, how many of you have seen this matrix before? Nobody? Oh, one per, okay. Yeah. I find this an incredibly helpful thing. And Raven, this goes right to what you were talking about. Like, what category is it in, and just give it the space to do that, and deciding, hey, I think with invoices is something that you can keep saying, well, it's not urgent yet. It's not urgent yet. It's not urgent yet. And then one day it is. And so we have many things like that. I don't like working with this client, and so I'll do their stuff tomorrow. But then now pretty soon the client's like, hey, where's my stuff, right? So we all have things that are aren't urgent that we ignore and suddenly become into that last category. So if you're in the not urgent and important category, get them on the schedule so they do not move into the last category. Okay. Okay. The final thing is to block.
2-minute break.
What?
Can we take a 2-minute break?
Totally. Yep.
I wanted to mention that I use rescue time to record everything I'm doing on my computer. And I'm finding it incredibly interesting, and it helps me figure out that sometimes I make mistakes when I'm just jotting down my start and finish, right? Because I work way longer on things than I notice.
Exactly. Yes, for sure. What is that the most interesting thing you found, just that you're surprised at how long you work on something?
Oh, yeah, or that I work 11 hours, or that, you know, I'm more productive than I think I am. Right? Like I'm always about 75% productive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, I find it, I thought it was going to be less effective than it really is, you know?
Yeah. It's tracking anything. If anybody's ever tracked their food before, tracking your food, tracking your time, it brings an awareness to it that we don't normally have. So I've heard rescue time. I've also heard, I think it's called harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? Harvest is good for that. And then there's one more that I've heard. I'm sure there's a bunch, but there are things that you can do to automate tracking. I'm a fan of automating as much as you can, and I feel like you guys would probably know more about those particular apps than I would. But okay.
I stopped using Harvest in favor of Rescue Time as well. I also tried Time Camp, and Rescue Time just makes me sad.
Why does it make you sad?
Oh, because I'm like, what? Like, where did those hours go? Like, seriously, like, what the heck happened? Rescue Time also has a really nice feature where I can do Pomodoros, you know?
Yeah.
I can, you know, set it for 25 minutes and at the end of the 25 minutes, just simply ignore getting up and walking around.
Yes.
Which is another depressing thing.
Out of curiosity, I am pro Pomodoro. Is everybody familiar with that technique?
No.
I see a couple people shaking. No. Oh, you have it on there? Yeah, the timer. Nice.
Oh, physically. Wow. Old school.
For those of you that are not familiar with it, I mean, this presentation is about how to manage your tasks, right? But if somebody called me and said, what's the one thing I can do to get more done? I would be like, Pomodoro your day. And you set a timer, can be at the time. I think that what Pomodoro says is, what did they say? 28 minutes? It doesn't matter what they say.
25. I think the original was 25 plus 5 times 3, and then a larger break after that.
Right. So 25 minutes of working on one task, a 5-minute break, and then you start again. And the beauty of that is you pick a task. It's not one task like clean my house, because you know how many of you clean your house? You go to put something in the bathroom. Now you're cleaning the bathroom for a minute, and then you go and nothing, like you're bouncing all around. It's one task. Like, I am going to do invoices for 25 minutes. I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to do anything else. And I think Pomodoro is, like, for me, it was life-changing in terms of getting more done. And it really meshes well with blocking like tasks. So what I like to do is I like to block a task, block time for the 3 tasks I'm going to talk about here, and then Pomodoro my way through that time. Okay. So these 3 tasks, you basically are doing 3 things. You're basically doing analytical stuff, creative stuff, and then routine stuff. Okay. So analytical stuff is the thing that generally kind of, you really need to not be distracted. You really need to focus without interruption. It takes a lot of brain power. And I don't know what that would, I'm going to say coding. Would I be right? Is that a fair, deeply analytical thing? Okay. So that would be something that's analytical, and analytical time blocks are really well, but are really good, but should be limited to like a max of 4 hours. I would even say 2 hours max, where you do something analytical and you can Pomodoro your way through that 2 to 3 hour block. And then you want to switch into something else like creative, like design, or looking for new software or whatever, something that's creative where you can think about it and you can do that stuff. And it gives you a break. A fully analytical day is hard. That's really hard. And so when you block your tasks into analytical, creative, and then routine is stuff that you don't need any thoughts about. Okay, I'm responding to some emails. I'm doing whatever your routine tasks might be. If you block things together, you will find that your day is more effective. An example of routine tasks would be saying, for the first half an hour of the day, I'm going to check my email, check my messages, check my social. Those are just routine tasks, and you'd block them together. Then you turn off all those notifications, and then you'd go into a time block of analytical or a time block of creative. And one of the things that usually ends up coming up here at this point is, okay, I've set my schedule. You take a Wednesday. On a Wednesday, I've blocked my time where I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. But now I've started this creative thing in my creative time block, and I am in flow state. I'm in that place where I'm making it happen. If you've created enough space in your schedule, it will allow you to just follow that through and let it be, because you've taken stuff off your calendar that's urgent and important. You've set time for other stuff, and you don't have it hanging over your head. Oh man, I'd love to keep working. It's just going so well right now, but I have to do this other thing before the end of the day. If you create enough space in your schedule, you can take yourself to a place where when that flow state happens, you can just let it go. And for some people that might be a day, for some people it might be 3 days. And if you create that enough space in your schedule, then those times can happen uninterrupted and without the anxiety that you're leaving something else important undone. So don't feel like by blocking your tasks, you've now painted yourself into a corner where you can't let those creative moments flow through, but just recognize that by doing the steps prior to this, you can create the space to allow that time to happen. And so basically, you can't make time. You can only create space in the time you have. We say, I need to make more time. That's impossible. Time is finite. And the only option we have is to create some space in the time we have so that we can manage urgent and important things when they come up without stress, so that we can allow our creative process to happen without interruption. And that in addition to all of that, we can do things that are outside of our work without guilt, without running our to-do list through our head, and without feeling like I have so much to do. I hate to, I don't have time to go away this weekend, or I don't have time to take the day off. Like those impromptu days off that I think can be so rejuvenating. If your schedule is in a place right now where you can't imagine just deciding to take the day off right now, creating space will help create that opportunity for that.
So
What do you got?
Annie, my tasks tend to completely vary from week to week and day to day, just depending on project list and which clients I'm working with at the moment. Do you kind of reevaluate your schedule daily or weekly, or how do you I'm just trying to think about how, some weeks I just sit and code for the week straight. And then this week I have 20 different clients contacting me and 20 different things going on. So it's just trying to figure out how to balance all of that is one of my issues.
Yeah, I say record for a week as kind of a general thing, but I'm somebody that my month is different. Each week is so varied that I would kind of need to look at a month schedule rather than a week schedule because of that kind of variability. And some people need to even look at a shorter schedule. So I think that the concept again is is to not like, it has to be this specific. The concept is, what would work in the bigger picture of your schedule? Would it work to say, like, let's say you kind of know that once a month you're going to have a week of coding. I'm making this up, okay? But let's say you know you're going to have that. You might want to make sure that you've scheduled yourself in a way that that can be uninterrupted so you can really make the most of that week, which would mean that wouldn't be a week that you would schedule your bookkeeping for.
Mm-hmm.
So you could look at it a little bit more holistically. You have to make it fit what works for you. But the more important part is blocking those things together so that when you're doing that coding, you don't get interrupted by something that's not important and not urgent.
Yeah.
I would mold it to what works for you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions that you guys, that's what I've got for you. So I'm open to questions, discussion, any other things that you guys want to ask. I will say that a lot of people get a little bit itchy at the idea of getting this specific. So so feel free to be like, no, this is way too specific for me, and we can talk about that too. But any questions? Oh, I guess I have one more thing. Sorry. I'll tell.
We want to go ahead with that?
Pardon?
Then are you going to go ahead with that slide?
Yes.
No, that I have a comment, but it's quite general, so I can do it later.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. This is just a summary of what I talked about. So go ahead with your.
Okay. I find your presentation very interesting, but I'm I usually have some, I don't know, it's like I read books or I hear to some talks regarding this matter. And in the first time, it's like, yeah, I will go for it. And it's all like beautiful, but then it's like, it's hard to sustain that in time. It's like I'm a heavy user of this kind of techniques, but in the long term, I can't maintain using any one of that. It's like, I remember the first time I started looking into it, it was like with a book which name is Get Things Done. So I thought it was like, yeah, I found the solution, but well, then it's like, it's hard to keep doing that.
Oh, for sure. I will say that even though some of my things are very specific, like do this for a week and then do this, that should be a one-time event. More of it is a way of thinking about your tasks. Like I kind of use the Eisenhower matrix just instinctively now, rather than as a specific assignment that you have to apply all the time. I'll be working on something and I'll be like, this is not important, this is not urgent. Let's put this on the calendar for Friday because I need to get this other thing done. So more of it is, I don't think it would be sustainable to be recording what you do every time, managing your tasks, all of that stuff. More of it is just saying, am I actually working on something that's the highest and best use of my time right now? And if I'm not, how do I change that? And in addition, when I am doing stuff that is the highest and best use of my time, how can I make sure I'm not doing anything else that interrupts that? So I hear what you're saying, and I fall off this all the time, right? Like I know how to do it, and then I'll find myself where like, oh, I'm doing this, and I always just remember to come back to like, just give it a place on the calendar. That's another simplification of what I'm talking about is, if you have all these things to do and you go, when am I ever going to do these? Just give them a home. Give them a home. I'm going to take care of that Friday. And now it's at least off your plate to do that. But I'm with you. I don't know if any of these systems are sustainable or if there's just another way to bring to our awareness what we're doing, right? Like, that's it. The one thing I will say is incredibly sustainable is Pomodoro. I mean, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry that your names aren't showing up on my screen, but whoever's raising your hand.
Martha here. I find a couple of things that my energy level varies dramatically from day to day, number one. And secondly, during this time of COVID, that I want to take time to connect with people. And that seems to be taking, a lot of time if you really want to, keep up with your acquaintances. And then thirdly, for me anyway, the news, the US news is so depressing that really affects my energy level too. And yet I feel I have to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think I've had that exact same feeling.
The list thing too is, do you have a list of all your, somewhere, or?
I don't, because everything's on my calendar, but I don't run to-do list. What I do run, how many of you are familiar with eating the frog? Is that something anybody? Eating the frog. So I have whatever my frog is for that day. If you start your day off with your worst task of the day, the whole rest of the day is better. So if you eat a frog in the morning, the rest of your day is going to be significantly better, right? So this is Brian Tracy. If you want to look it up, Eat the Frog is a YouTube video and it's great. So my to-do list is one thing, because the word priority is meant to be singular. You cannot have priorities, because then none of them are, right? So what is the one thing you could do today that would make everything else better? What's your force multiplier? If you've got this thing hanging over your head, if you don't like doing invoices like Raven's talking about, eat that frog in the morning. Get up and eat that frog. Because if you do those invoices, now the whole rest of your day seems easier. So I don't run a to-do list. I find a to-do list to be, if I find myself in a situation where I have to write 3 or 4 things down, that's my cue to go give them a home on my calendar. And then my calendar's in charge of remembering it for me. That's how I manage that. In terms of what you're saying about like watching the news and stuff, I've had this exact same sense of like, I should know what's going on, but watching it just is so not rejuvenating, right? In that list of, is it distracting? Is it procrastinating? Is it rejuvenating? I could have added, is it depressing, right? And I think that you could at least limit it, because what I've decided, this is just my own personal choice for myself. I've decided that I probably don't need to know what's going on every day, but I could check in like a couple times a week. And because I do think it impacts your energy level and all of that stuff. So I think limiting it is a really good thing. And I've told a few people that have news notifications where it let me rephrase what I'm going to say. If you're going to watch the news, it should be your choice to go into it. If the news is coming to you through notifications, through pop-ups and everything like that, it's way more stressful. So I would say at least switch it so that you're the one that's proactively deciding to intake that information, rather than that you're getting articles in your email box and all of that stuff. I would really recommend limiting that personally. Raven.
I just wanted to share something that I've been doing. I think all of us are probably doing this, how do I handle the stress of the current times and get anything productive done at all? And so one of the things that I have done that sort of relates to what you've been talking about, I had like lights going on as you were talking earlier about sort of writing down everything you do, because one of the things that I've been doing in recent weeks has been making a list every day of all the things that I do. Because I was doing this thing of saying, I didn't do anything today, or I'm not being productive, not getting anything done. And when I began actually writing down, I spent 2 hours in my garden. I went for a walk. I cooked some really good food. I worked for several hours, and I was also, I've got a list of things, a to-do list that's sort of an unstructured to-do list. I need to deal with the wasps who are building a nest in the side of my house. I write down on the list and I don't have to think about it every minute. And then every day I can sit down and look at that list and say, I'm going to pick 3 things that I'm going to do today. If I do those 3 things, I get a gold star and I can go back to bed if I want to, or I can continue on doing other things. And then I also have been putting on that list things I actually want to do. sit on my back porch and read a novel, you know. And so if I spend some time doing that, yay me. And it's really helped me manage my sense of I'm not being productive, my sense of being overwhelmed and depressed by the news, all of this stuff. It's just sort of, at the end of the day, I can actually go, I actually did a lot today because I was doing exactly what you were saying, Annie, about underestimating some of the things that how much time I spent doing things and overestimating other things. So that's just been super, super helpful to me.
And that list is, it sounds like what you're saying. I think lists like that are good. That's a list of non-important and non-urgent things. It's nice to have that they have an awareness over here. And so that's a way to.
If they're urgent and important, then I put it on today's list as one of the things I'm going to do today.
Exactly, exactly. To your other point, Martha, about your energy levels are different at different times. I definitely think that I'm most effective from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. So I put my analytical things from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. So you kind of, now that 7 days a week, no, I'm not productive 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. But I absolutely know that I cannot schedule an analytical task in the afternoon or any time after 5 p.m. I just turn into a pumpkin. So there's no way that I can schedule an analytical task, no matter how much I want to get it done, anytime past a morning hour, right? So at least, even if day to day you might have less or more energy, you give yourself a higher chance of success by making sure that you've carved out time in the time that's most typically your best time, right? And then if you've created enough space, if the planets don't align that day and you wake up and you're like, hey, I've got an analytical block in the morning, but I'm just not feeling it today. I need to read a novel on my porch. You've created enough space and you have another analytical block that can just happen tomorrow. And that's the goal, right? I do feel like in the state that we're in, I always feel like people need to have rejuvenating things going on. But I feel like in the state we're in, I actually think we should increase that level. And there are days that I just have what I call off the grid days where it all turns off and I just put in my headphones and I listen to an audiobook that's definitely fiction all day. And then I can kind of come back with more of a vigor the next day. And I will say that for me, that's not normal. I'm not usually a person that needs to check out for a day, but I really have found that I have been in the past few months, and I found it to be so beneficial. So I would say to, I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but we've got to work with our ebb and flows of energy and attitude. We just have to accept that. And if we create more space in our schedule, then we can give ourselves a lot more latitude for those times.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? So this slide is just a summary. You record for 1 week, you segment the stuff that you do, you put it into the different categories. I know this sounds really silly, but I don't have a cursor for whatever reason, and I can't move your faces out of the way to tell you what the right-hand part of this slide says. So you can read it, and you can all, I'm sure it's very simple to solve.
Creative routine, that's it.
Yeah, okay, great. I cannot solve that problem right now. So anyway, you block everything out, and then you eliminate or schedule stuff. And there's only, to eliminate stuff, you have two choices. Quit or delegate, and to schedule stuff, you decide their importance and their urgency, you block light tasks, and they're either analytical, creative, or routine. So this is just a summary of what you're looking at to manage your tasks rather than manage your time. And that is really what I'm getting at, is we focus on time management, we really need to focus on task management. That's it. If you want to email me, there's my email. And if you're welcome to do that. I'm happy to answer questions. I like talking about this stuff all the time. I do work with people, small business owners, on a pretty consistent basis on specifically this stuff. So any other questions or comments for me? Yeah.
I just want to say that this has been incredibly helpful and super valuable. Thank you so much.
I love that. Good. I'm so,
I
I'm
mean,
so,
I literally asked for that 2-minute break because I did not want to miss anything.
thank you so much. Yeah, I forget to take breaks because I get kind of excited about it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, people probably need a break. So anybody, thank you so much, Raven. I appreciate that. Anybody else?
So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. I think I'm trying to synthesize it and trying to see how this works for me, but like thinking about just slotting time for like analytical tasks and creative tasks, and then as the work comes in, just dropping it into that slot. Like that's sort of how I think my takeaway is for
Yeah.
in terms of because I just don't know from like week to week or even day to day like what my tasks are, but I do think thinking about it that way I think really helps me to organize like my week.
Even if you get up in the morning, if your day's kind of set, like you could even maybe kind of have a loose day schedule where analytical in the morning, creative in the afternoon, routine at the end of the day. I'm making this up, right? Then when you wake up in the morning and there's several emails you have to get back to, you know that that's going to happen in the afternoon, right? You just know, and you can put it off doing that. Well, although I know for email, some people are more effective when they have a half an hour in the morning and then a half an hour at the end of the day, so they don't feel like they have all these emails that they're not answering all day, right? I'm a big advocate that we should train people that emails might take a day or two to get back to. So I would say, but I also know that we live in a world where people expect faster responses. And even though I'd like to start a movement where we go back to slower responses, I understand that we're not in that world. So I would at least say break it down to 2 times a day or 3 if you need to, but not that you're checking your email all day. So what you're saying, Patty, like putting it in a bucket is a really easy, simple way to start. What am I doing and how am I focusing on that task, especially things you don't enjoy doing? If you do those and there's any ability for interruptions to pop into those, you're just not likely to go back to them. And then they move to urgent. Then they become urgent. Yeah. Anything else? Well, there you go.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
No problem. It was nice to see everyone.
very interesting.
Good. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing this, Annie.
No problem. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you soon.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye.
Bye. For anyone that's remaining, we still have 45 minutes scheduled. So if you guys want to stay and you want to, if you have anything that you want to ask the group, or I do have a question for y'all. Do you guys know WordPress Bob? WordPress Bob. He's moving like strictly into WooCommerce kind of stuff. And he asked if we would be interested in having him come talk. So I just wanted to get a sense if how much you guys work with WooCommerce, if that's something that's you'd be interested in, or like a thumbs up or a sideways.
I don't work with it, so.
You don't work with it?
No.
I work with it, but he has his own.
Yeah, he has his own.
Is there something like freelance related that he thinks?
I think he's trying to start up a more of a stronger WooCommerce community.
I just launched a WooCommerce site yesterday, as a matter of fact. Where was Bob before? Yeah, I try and stay away from WooCommerce as much as possible.
That's my same thought.
What's that?
I have the same feelings.
It's just one of those things that it's just there's just too many variables with it. And the only reason I did this site is because I've been working with the client for the past 5-6 years, and trying to get them, off of, they were just using buy now buttons, buy now
Yeah.
PayPal buttons, and their process was just, there was no automation to it whatsoever. And so we moved into a WooCommerce site, and they were spending 6-7 hours a day printing, packing, everything, and now with WooCommerce that's gone down to like an hour and a half.
Oh, that's cool.
So, but I just don't like working with WooCommerce because it's just a different beast, and there's just there's too many things. And next thing you know, I had one client that I turned down afterward. They had something like 20 products. So it's like, okay, well, the 20, yeah, it's not too bad. But then each product had like 15 different variables, and it's like, holy crap, and that's where you get in trouble. Is if, they say, oh, it's a simple, it's 20 products. But if those 20 products have 10, 15 different variables, I mean, you're talking, almost a day. It literally could take you a day per product to set up.
Yeah.
So do you just avoid them, like e-commerce in general, or do you have a different solution?
I just try to avoid it, but I do use WooCommerce. I mean, have to. I mean, I don't know that there's. I mean, Shopify is a great platform, but it's expensive. It's totally separate from WordPress.
You can integrate it though, right? Or is it just
not really? It's a standalone platform. Like you can have products listed, I think, but once they click on it, it takes them off.
Takes it to Shopify. So it's not a seamless integration.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've had clients like I install WooCommerce and the next thing, like I have to be their tax expert. And I'm like, I don't know anything about taxes. It's not my thing. But yeah. So I'll take that as from at least this crew, a not strong interest.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question that I'm wrestling with about website building. I don't know if it's if this meetup is the right venue for it, but let me ask, and you guys can either say whatever. So it has to do with, I'm wrestling with how to design sites so that if my client wants to use what's it called? Google's reCAPTCHA version 3, the invisible reCAPTCHA. So how do I be compliant with the requirement that people actively opt in to the level of surveillance that Google is doing when you put that on your site? Because basically when you put that on your site, it's not just the people who are submitting forms who are being surveilled by Google. It's every visitor to your site. And you have to make it possible for people to opt in. And I'm just trying to figure out how to do that, and particularly how to do that on the site I'm working on, where elegant and simple design is a high priority.
Excellent
question. I might need to speak to a larger crowd to find the person who's got the answer for me.
I don't know if some of the cookie consent solutions might help.
What I'm seeing is, the pop-up cookie consent, and this is exactly why people are using that. And part of my concern with that, okay, first of all, I just find them annoying. I'm kind of like, am I going to be living in a world where every time I move from one site to another, I have to click that little thing? And the other thing is, the more I click that little thing, the less I read what that little thing is actually saying, right? So it pops up and I click it off, and it pops up, and it might be sign up for our newsletter pop-up, or it might be you are consenting to being surveilled in every aspect of your life pop-up, and I just click it off and move forward, right? So, but that's kind of been the only solution I've been able to come up with in researching this, is to have a consent pop-up that every single visitor to the site needs to either consent to or not consent to.
Yeah, I think that's the way things are going.
Is moving away from CAPTCHA not an option?
Sorry?
I said, it's just like doing a non-CAPTCHA solution to.
Moving away from CAPTCHA. I've actually thought about that. So one of the things that I considered proposing to my client is that we're using Contact 7. So and it has a honeypot option. So I thought we would start with the honeypot, and if spam becomes a problem that we need to step up to a solution, a different solution, we could do that. And I may suggest that that's where we start. My personal experience with that has been every site I've built so far where I've tried a wide variety of non-CAPTCHA form spam solutions. And consistently what happens is it works for a while, and a while might be a year and a half. It works for a while, and then all of a sudden one day it's not enough anymore. And so more and more what's been happening is I've been having clients contact me after I've built their site and say, now we need to step up our spam solution. And I've been doing Google reCAPTCHA for that. And now Contact 7 has, gotten to where it will accept the older versions of reCAPTCHA. You have to do the version 3. So I feel like, I feel trapped in Google's world.
We all are.
Yeah.
But what does their privacy policy say, or how is their privacy policy?
You don't have any. Their privacy policy is our business model is to collect as much information as possible about everyone in the world and all their activity, both online and off. But don't worry, we're going to not be evil with that information.
I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think.
We recently did the same thing. We got rid of CAPTCHA, went to honeypots, but yeah, we probably.
How's it working out for you?
It's been good for the month we've done it, but we're probably a few months out from adding the CAPTCHAs back on to that client site.
Might as well start there, though, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if what I'm gonna try is moving the honeypots around and renaming them. I don't know if it's gonna make any difference, but that's kind of
That's something I hadn't even thought of. Yeah. All right. Well, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other? Oh yeah, go ahead, Clay.
I was wondering if any of y'all had any experience with partnering up with someone else or doing a project in tandem, and how you guys structured that, or does one person's company kind of act as they're hiring the other person as a independent contractor, or are there other systems that you've seen work well or anything like that?
I work with a designer, and we bill completely separate, and that's in our contract that you pay her for the design and you pay me for the development, because then you get into for a while she was bringing in a lot of the work and paying me, but then we ended up paying, you essentially are kind of paying the tax twice. So she's paying a tax on the income, and the way the taxes worked out, it's a little bit cleaner to just bill separately. It works out for us. Some clients things like universities or places that have a little more complex billing, they get a little annoyed, but we're this is how we work. We've done it this way for years, so this is how you're going to pay us. And so it works out. You guys have any experience?
Also sometimes work with a designer, and we've tried both sides of that dynamic that you just done. So most of the work that I've done for her, she has just hired me and I bill her. She bills the client, and I generally prefer to do it that way because she's the one who is coming back to me and saying, can you tweak this? Can you tweak that? So that the page looks exactly like she wants it to. And so what I like about having her pay me is that the same person who is sending me back to tweak things is the person who's writing the check for the time it took me to tweak things. The job that we're working on right now, she designed, I'm building, and I am billing the client directly for my bill, for my development work. And when she said she wanted to do it that way, I was concerned because I've had this come back to bite me in the past, where one person at the company that hired me is saying, tweak this, tweak that. And then the person who writes the check is like, oh my God, why did it spend so long to get this thing built?
Yeah.
So far, so good with this current client. It had, you know, my designer and I discussed it before we went into this, and, you know, I explained my trepidation and she understood it, but we decided to go forward with it anyway. And so far, so good. But that's definitely something I would watch for if you're doing the billing separately thing. You need to have really good communication with the person you're billing. When things, you know, if there's scope creep, or, you know, when something takes longer than you expected it to, I find that it's better to discuss that with the person who's writing the check as early in the process as possible, rather than coming up later.
So in the case where like she was paying you, was that like you were an independent contractor to her? And
Yes.
okay. And so maybe she was kind of taking on that tax burden you were talking about, Patty? Of like, is kind of the person that is doing the billing and then paying out the other person, is that the person that's kind of taking on the extra tax situation?
Yeah, I think so. I don't totally understand it, but
I was just going to ask her to explain it to us.
I think that she was having to pay, she was paying tax on the income and then paying tax, like employment tax to me, like on top of that. So essentially she's giving an extra tax burden. And then I'm paying tax on my income. So like the same pot of money
She
is
pays
getting
income tax on the same money you're paying income tax on.
I think so, because so it's harder to
passing through.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's like harder to track that.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
But I do totally hear what you're saying, Raven, about she's coming up with the design and then that's like way more complex than what we agreed to for the price. And so, but now that I've been working with her for a number of years, we've kind of, the design process is a way more streamlined. So I think it helps to work with the same person. So I at least know what to expect. And a lot of, you know, I can reuse a lot of the same code and stuff on different sites. Do you guys have any things you're dying to talk about in terms of upcoming months? I think
What is going on with WordCamp? Do we know?
I don't know. I know last we spoke, they were still trying to figure out whether to schedule it. I think they really want to do something next spring, but and I think they're talking about moving it online because reserving a place, you know, just doesn't make any sense. So I think that's what the latest has been. I haven't met with those guys in a while, so I'm not sure exactly, but I think that's the goal, is to do something online in the next spring. There is a big meetup coming up in September. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's basically calling it a mega meetup. So all of the meetups getting together, that will all be online. And then we'll have breakout rooms for each of the individual meetups.
Oh, I remember we were talking about doing that at the Seattle Library, about having like a talk and then like having 45-minute breakout sessions or whatever.
Yeah, so that is still on the schedule for September. Sorry, I don't know. What was that, Raven?
It's just like the old days in the big WordPress meetup when it was down in South Lake, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, just like that. So that's on the calendar. I think it's in the meetup, so you can look out for that.
Well, I'm just kind of bummed that they canceled WordCamp US. It was gonna be all online, and they canceled it. Like,
they canceled the online?
Yes, last week.
Oh wow! Why?
I don't know.
Huh.
I don't know. They just announced it like last week that they were that they canceled it. I was kind of bummed. I'm like, oh man, because I can't. Well, I don't know where it is. Where was it? It was supposed to be, I think, in Nashville again or whatever. But it's like, I don't want to go to Nashville. But it was on. All these WordCamps are online. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you can attend these things, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then so I'm thinking, oh, right on, U.S. WordCamp's going to be. And then it's like, oh, we canceled it. What?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I'll have to look that up. I know I have attended like one session that was like it was organized by the people who organized WordCamp US. That was on all about blocks. And it was a really great session, like block development. They had some pretty big names and people working on all that stuff. It was all day, but you could kind of pop, like the nice thing about it being online is you could pop in and out.
Well, that's what's kind of nice about it right now. I mean, it sucks
Yeah.
what's going on in the world, but at the same time, it's kind of cool because you can expand your education. I did some sessions at WordCamp Denver.
Cool.
Speakers that I was like, oh, I've never seen them before. So watch it, so that's what's kind of cool, is that you can spend a little bit of time going to other, WordCamps. But so yeah, I was just curious because I remember seeing something that they were talking about doing in the spring, but just nothing. I haven't heard anything since.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked, I think there was some debate, but I'm pretty sure by now, I think it's pretty clear that organizing an in-person event next spring is probably not a good idea, just because there's so many unknowns.
And then you said the mega meetup.
Yeah, let me find
September. I was gonna look. I was just real quick.
Hey, what do you think about turning off the recording since we were?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
It'll make for a small